Hello, and welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Church of Plano online. My name is Jeanette Bailey, and I am one of the worship associates here at the church. We have a wonderful service for you today as guest speaker and musician Kaya Hartwood leads us with Hope, Not Hell, Stories of Universalism. We are Unitarian Universalists, or UUs, but how much do you know about that second U? It's more than just our denomination's last name. We hope you enjoy this music and insight-filled service as Kaya takes us on an exploration and history of Universalist theology. Kaya is a graduate of the Star King School for the Ministry, receiving her Master's of Divinity degree in 2020. Kaya has a long career as a musician, speaker, and creator of good in the world. She is based in Austin, Texas, and serves as the minister for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Victoria, Texas. She is also the artistic director for the People's Orchestra of Austin. Please get comfortable and enjoy the music and the message for today. Holy and beautiful, the custom which brings us together in the presence of the Most High, to face our ideals, to remember our loved ones in absence, to give thanks, to make confession, to offer forgiveness, to be enlightened, and to be strengthened. Through this quiet hour breathes the worship of ages, the cathedral music of history. 3 unseen guests attend: faith, hope, and love. Let all our hearts prepare them place. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consume our regrets for the past, our fears about the future, and our worries about today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace. Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal denomination. We hold that we do not have to believe alike in order to love alike. In this and every UU community, there are a diversity of personal creeds, but there is one covenant for our church, and each time we gather, we recite it again. Please join with me now. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
Come, let us raise our voices high and form a sacred song to Him that rules the earth and sky and does our days prolong. And and through the night, who through the night gave us the night, gave us tonight, gave us to rest. This morning she arise, and with the thousands of the blessed, let him make us to rise. Early to God we send our prayer, make haste to pray and praise, that He may make our goodness care, and guide us all our days. And when the night of death comes on, and we shall say our death comes on, and we shall end our days. May His rich grace the theme prolong of His eternal grace.
This morning's story for all ages is about Maria Cook, the first woman Universalist preacher. In 1779, more than 200 years ago, a girl named Maria Cook was born in New York State. When she was born, the Americans were fighting the British in the War of Independence. The Americans wanted to have their own country where they could be independent and free to make their own decisions and say what they thought. When Maria was 4, the Americans won the war. They had their own independent country and they were free to make their own decisions. When Maria was 8 years old, Americans decided to have a constitution that promised freedom of religion and freedom of speech. The Constitution promised that, in America, people had the right to choose what to believe in and the right to speak out for what they believed. Maria chose to believe in a religion called Universalism. People called it Universalism because the religion said God loved all people, everyone in the universe, no matter what. And since God loved everyone, eventually everyone would be with God in heaven. Other religions said only a few people went to heaven, the rest went to hell. And not just people who did bad things. In those religions, it didn't matter if people did good things or bad things. In those religions, people who did bad things went to hell, and some people who did good things went to hell too. God chose only a few to come to heaven. Maria didn't believe that. She believed that God chose everyone. She believed God loved everyone in the universe, even if they did bad things. After all, sometimes she did bad things, and her mother and father still loved her. God was her parent too. That's what Maria believed, and so she chose to be a Universalist. When Maria was grown up, she decided to speak out for what she believed. She started talking to people about how God loved everyone and everyone would go to heaven. She talked to everyone about Universalism. She talked to people in their houses, she talked to people on the streets, and she talked to people in the stores. And then she started talking to people in church. Not just after church or before church, but during church. She actually went up to the pulpit where preachers go and started talking about Universalism. Then people started talking about her. Because back then, even though the Constitution promised all people would have freedom of speech, it didn't really work that way. Women weren't supposed to talk in public. Women weren't allowed to vote, which is a very important way of speaking out for what you believe in. Women were not allowed to give speeches and run for office, so no one could vote for them either. And they certainly weren't supposed to be preachers. Some people thought it said so in the Bible. But Maria preached anyway. She spoke out for what she believed in. She traveled from town to town preaching about universalism. Lots of people came to listen, even though she was a woman. She spoke so well that many people started believing in universalism too. In 1811, a Universalist church gave Maria Cook a letter of fellowship, and today we remember her as the first woman to be a Universalist minister in the United States. Not everyone liked having a woman preaching in their town. They didn't want her there. In 1813, she was arrested. The police said it was because she was a vagrant and didn't have a house to live in, even though she did, because she was staying with friends at their house. When the police came, Maria didn't argue, she didn't resist, but she didn't help either. Maria refused to walk. The police had to pick her up and carry her to a wagon. They drove the wagon to Cooperstown, New York. Then they had to carry her out of the wagon to go see the judge. Maria knew she hadn't done anything wrong. In the courtroom, she spoke out and told the judge that. She told him she didn't recognize his authority. She did not think he had the right to be the judge of her. She refused to answer his questions. For that, the judge sentenced her to jail. Maria wouldn't walk there either. The police had to pick her up and carry her to jail. And once she was there, guess what she started to do? She talked to the people in jail. She talked to the police. She talked to the prisoners. She talked to everyone she met about universalism. She just kept right on preaching. After a few weeks, the judge let her go. Maria continued traveling to different towns and preaching about universalism. All her life, Maria Cook spoke out for what she believed in and did what she thought was right. She didn't yell. She didn't push or hit. She spoke out. The Universalist religion Maria Cook talked about is part of our own heritage and part of our religion's name, Unitarian Universalist. Like Maria Cook, we believe every person should stand up and speak out for what they think is right and true. We believe everyone should have a say about matters that concern them, and no one should be put in jail for speaking out. Thank you.
This reading is often attributed to John Murray, but it's actually by Alfred S. Cole. You may possess only a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Do not push them deeper into their theological despair, but preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. Alfred S. Cole.
Breathe with me into the beginning. See the spinning tiny dot in the vastness of space. On its surface, water and fire kissing, hissing. crashing together, pulling apart. Their names are Arctica, Baltica, Atlantica, Nina, Rodinia, Pangea. Come back to the water's rush. Come back to the hush of your soul at its beginning. Deep calls to deep. The blue pearl floats in infinite space. I am the water, and you are, and the porpoise, and the bear. The tulip is water, and the maple, the cloud, the lake, and the lion. We are all made of water that is older than the Nile, sipped 1,000 times, sweated and wept, and evaporated into the sky, raining down again, changing form for untold ages. Will you be a puddle that reflects the sky? Will you be on an otter's tongue? Will you dissolve into the sea in the end? Will you always be in the end? Will you always be?
This sermon is called Hope, Not Hell, Universalist Stories Part 1. So I'm going to go up till about 1830 or so, 1840, and start at the very beginning of Christianity. There are still Universalist churches in America. Most of them are in the Christian Universalist Association, the ones that didn't merge with the Unitarians. What is Universalism? Well, there's a couple of tenets that are pretty common to no matter what kind of universalist you're talking about. Basically, God is unconditionally compassionate and loving. That is the main thing. And the second thing is universalists tend to not believe that Jesus is divine. They think of him as the model for what you want to be as a human. They think of him as a great rabbi and a great teacher. And as you use, we kind of hold that belief. The second thing is that God would not burn his children in hell. The difference is there are two kinds of American Universalists. The kind that believe that there is a period of time where you have to atone or redeem yourself before you're eventually saved. Or the ultra universalists, which are like Jose Blue, and they believe that there's no hell at all and everybody gets saved. Now, I'm going to throw a lot of theological concepts at you, arguments, and name a lot of early bishops in the Christian church. What you need to remember is the first 500 years of Christianity were almost all universalist. It isn't until Augustine that we get a whole lot of hell going on. Some people you might want to check out are Clement of Alexandria, who lived 150 to 220, and Origen, 185 to 253 to 255. They're not quite sure. And Arius. Those are all bishops of Alexandria. And they taught that Jesus was the Son of God, but he was subordinate to God, that God was on top. And there wasn't a Trinity necessarily. Now this lasts until the Council of Nicaea in 325. And at that point, it was declared the Arian controversy, the Arian heresy. So we're all heretics. Congratulations. You can assume that most of the Christians that got eaten in the Colosseum by lions in Rome were Universalists. Every soul, including the devil, shall be restored and returned to a knowledge and presence with God. These beliefs resurface in the 1600s and 17th century when Protestants start reading the Bible for themselves. This is a radical thing. Just to have a Bible in your own language and be able to read it for yourself and determine what's there. And the thing was, a lot of people saw that hell wasn't in there. And it depends on how you interpret a particular word. So it's interesting and you can get real deep in it, but that's basically what's going on. Now, one of the second generations of reformers was this guy named John Calvin. He lived from 1509 to 1564. And he believed, well, the Presbyterians are Calvinists. Many people were Calvinists, including our Puritan ancestors, our Congregationalist ancestors. And they believed in a thing called TULIP. TULIP stands for, 1, the total depravity of humans. We are evil. 2, unconditional election. There is literally a list that God has of who is saved and who is damned, and there's nothing you can do about it. 3, there's limited atonement. Like Christ died for the saved people's sins, but not necessarily the unsaved people. 4, irresistible grace. I in the TULIP. Irresistible grace. There's nothing you can do about it. You're saved, you're going to stay there. So 5 is preservation of the saints. Once saved, always saved. So those are the basic ideas of Calvinism. It's in the American Anglo settlers' DNA. They are Calvinist at the bottom of them. And even in the early church versions of Baptists and Methodists, they're Calvinists. Which brings us to how we're going to get Universalism to America. In England, you have the Church of England, the Anglicans. And if you're not in the Church of England, you are a dissenter. And sometimes you're in trouble, you get put in jail, and sometimes you're okay and you can get by. But that's us. Universalists, Quakers, some Baptists, some Methodists. They're anti-Calvin. So there was a Welsh Calvinist preacher, a Methodist, named James Raleigh, Relly, and he lived from 1772 to 1778. And he converted to Universalism, and he later converted John Murray. John Murray was also another evangelist preacher at that point. He was a Methodist. And John Murray lived from 1741 to 1815. But John Murray's wife died, and his child died, and he was in despair. And so he decided to go to America. In September 30th, 1770, John Murray preaches the first Universalist sermon in America to Tom Potter and his family and all the neighbors at Murray Grove. You can still go to Murray Grove. It's a Unitarian Universalist retreat center. After he did that, he started preaching everywhere, evangelizing for Universalism. John Murray serves as the first chaplain for the Continental Army for Rhode Island. He marries his second wife, Judith Sargent Stevens Murray. And Judith's dates are 1751 to 1820. And she's amazing. She was a writer and an early feminist. She had a license to preach in Massachusetts in the 1700s. She writes,
"Were I to personify justice instead of presenting her blind, I would denominate her the goddess of fire. Of unbending integrity, justice should feel, hear, and see. But truth alone should be the polar star by which she should shape her movements, and equity only should constrain her determinations." Judith Sargent Murray.
So Judith Murray and John Murray, they find the first Universalist church in North America in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Now, this church is really important for a lot of reasons. For one, they sued so they wouldn't have to keep paying the standing order tax that paid for Congregationalist churches in New England towns. You just paid your taxes and you tithed automatically. And so they had to pay for their church on top of that. Well, they sued in Massachusetts to stop that. And that is the beginning of our separation of church and state. One of the founders of that church was Gloucester Dalton, who lived from 1720 to 1813, and he's the first African-American member of a Universalist church. He was an African brought to America as a slave. Another early African-American member of a Universalist church was Amy Scott. She was a free black in Philadelphia in the 1790s. Another revolutionary Universalist who you should definitely know about is Dr. Benjamin Rush. 1746 to 1813, he signed the Declaration of Independence. He was president of the First Anti-Slavery Society, and in 1790, the Universalists in Philadelphia issued a decree condemning slavery. Many reformers were Universalists, including Elhanan Winchester, who preached to slaves in South Carolina and had a multiracial church. Educator reformer Thomas Whitmore, who lived 1800 to 1861, and Clara Barton, who founded the Red Cross, who lived from 1821 to 1912. Early women ministers like Maria Cook, who was preaching in the late 1700s, and Lydia Mouton Jenkins, 1821 to 1912. These women opened doors to women that led to the first ordained women in the 1860s, like Olympia Brown. Now, Reverend Hosea Ballou lives from 1771 to 1852. He converted from being a Baptist to Universalist in about 1789. He was a circuit rider. He went all over preaching and preaching and preaching. He gave over 10,000 sermons and wrote countless hymns. We sang one of his hymns earlier that's in the shape note, and that's the style of the early Universalist churches and people who didn't have wagons that could carry pianos around the country. He rejected the concept of the Trinity. He rejected the concept of restorationism. He just didn't believe in hell altogether. He is the father of ultra universalism. That's what that means. And it means that you aren't into Calvin and you're not into hell, and everybody gets saved right away. No waiting, no temporary purgatory. He had the Second Universalist Church in Boston about the same time that William Ellery Channing had the Unitarian Church. They evidently they were just down the street from each other, but they never talked. That's important. When you think about universalism, you should think poorer people, more self-employed people, more lower middle class people, more a rich mix of people, women having a lot of power. This was the place, this was the church you wanted to be in if you were in a racially mixed couple, or you you were working for social justice now. Heaven is here, and we're making it happen here. And we're not waiting till we die and go to heaven. We're getting busy. So some people call Hosea Ballou the first modern UU. I'll tell you a story on him that kind of tells you everything you need to know about him. One day he was riding a circuit in New Hampshire, and he was riding alongside a Baptist preacher who was also a circuit rider, and they were arguing theology as they traveled. At one point, the Baptist looks over at Brother Ballou and he says, "Brother Ballou, if I were a Universalist and feared not the fires of hell, I could hit you over the head, steal your horse and saddle, and ride away, and I'd still go to heaven." Hosea Ballou looked over at him and said, "If you were a Universalist, that idea would never have occurred to you." I like him. I like his spirit, and I like his picture. And you can. Ballou was riding the circuit again when he stopped for the night at a New England farmhouse. The farmer was really upset. He confided to Ballou that his son was a terror who got drunk in the village every night and who fooled around with all the women, and the farmer was afraid the son was going to go to hell. "All right," said Ballou with a very serious face. "We'll find a place on the path where your son will be coming home drunk, and we'll build a big fire. And when he comes home, we'll grab him and throw him in it." The farmer was shocked. "That's my son, and I love him." Ballou said, "If you, a human and an imperfect father, love your son so much that you wouldn't throw him in the fire, then how can you possibly believe that God would do that?" Yeah, good stuff. Universalism. I hope this gets you more interested in searching our Universalist ancestors. Thank you. This is the most popular gospel song for a Universalist during the Civil War. It's by Robert Lowry. It's called "Shall We Gather at the River." Shall we gather at the river where bright angels' feet have trod, with its crystal tide forever flowing by the throne of God? Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful, beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river, flowing by the throne of God. Soon we'll reach the shining river, soon our pilgrimage will cease, soon our happy hearts will quiver with the melody of peace. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful, beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful, beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God.
This beloved community is a living thing. and we bring much to it by our presence, our love, our caring, our generosity, and our hard work. We may be fed by it in equal or even larger measure. In these uncertain times, we encourage you to give as you are able, so that the good works of our church may continue. So how can you make your donation? You may send a check to the church building address, which you can find on the front page of our website. You can also donate by visiting our website and clicking on the blue Donate Now button on the front page. On behalf of our community, your generosity is deeply appreciated. As our worship time draws to a close, let us recite together the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Remember the way of the wind and breathe and blow. Remember the way of the fire, sparkle, glitter, and glow. Remember the way of the water and ebb and flow. Remember the way of the earth and grow. Go in peace.